They called themselves the HOA cops, a self-appointed squadron of busybodies led by one Brenda Mulroney, a woman whose thirst for petty power was as vast and unquenchable as the backcountry she clearly didn't understand bordered her little fiefdom. It began, as these tyrannies often do, with a whisper of paper under my door, a violation notice, crisp and officious, for unauthorized recreational activities. The audacity was breathtaking. My family had owned this sprawling tract of wilderness, the deep forest, the shimmering expanse of what my grandfather had simply called the Big Lake, for 3 generations. We weren't just residents of the adjacent, comparatively sterile subdivision. We were stewards of a legacy carved from hard work and a profound respect for the wild. The notice cited my early morning fishing expeditions on my lake, the quiet hours spent listening to the gentle lapping of waves against the hull of my canoe, and the occasional, carefully managed deer hunting season in the deep backcountry, miles from any manicured lawn. Brenda, apparently, considered the distant, muffled report of my 36, or the sight of my truck returning with a cooler, an affront to her vision of suburban tranquility. The initial fine was a paltry sum, almost laughable, but it wasn't about the money. It was about the principle, a creeping encroachment I recognized with a cold, familiar dread from arenas far more dangerous than an HOA meeting. My response was simple, a polite, registered letter with copies of my deeds, property surveys, and a clear delineation of where their authority ended and my land began. I explained, with a patience I didn't feel, that my hunting and fishing activities were not only legal but occurred exclusively on private property, my land, far removed from the HOA's jurisdiction. I expected, perhaps naively, that this would be the end of it. A simple misunderstanding cleared up by facts. I underestimated Brenda. The fines continued. Each one was a little paper dart, aimed not at my wallet but at my peace. Improper vehicle storage. When my hunting ATV was parked well within my property line, albeit visible from a particularly intrusive angle if one were, say, trespassing with binoculars. Nuisance wildlife attraction due to the bird feeders my daughter loved, which Brenda claimed drew deer closer to the subdivision, deer that naturally roamed the vast forest that was, again, my land. The HOA cops, emboldened by Brenda's zeal, began to patrol the periphery of my property with an air of grim importance. I'd see them, flashlights cutting impotent arcs into the dusk, peering towards my lake as if expecting to catch me in some nefarious act of enjoying my own damn property. My wife, Sarah, a woman of infinite calm, began to show strain. "Can't you just talk to her again?" she asked, her voice tight. But I knew Brenda. Talking was not a tactic that worked with despots, petty or otherwise. They only understood the language of leverage, of power. The HOA cops even had the gall to leave a notice on my boat, moored securely at my private dock on my lake, citing it as an unapproved watercraft in community area. Community area? The sheer delusion was staggering. The waves on that lake had sung lullabies to my father and his father before him. This wasn't just land, it was blood and memory. My quiet fishing trips became acts of defiance. The solitude of the backcountry, where I'd go for hunting, was now tinged with a simmering resentment. Brenda, in her quest for absolute control over her 50-acre kingdom of asphalt and vinyl siding, had declared war on a man who owned the 1,000 acres of wilderness surrounding it. She just didn't know the nature of the man she was provoking, or the dormant authorities I possessed. The intensely personal nature of her attacks, the way she seemed to target not just actions but my very connection to the land, began to solidify a cold resolve within me. The moral violation, the true casus belli, arrived not as a fine, but as a proposal. At the next HOA meeting, which I attended with a sense of grim foreboding, Brenda unveiled her Community Enrichment Initiative. It was a plan to develop a network of nature trails for hiking and designated wilderness camping spots. My blood ran cold as the project flashed a map. The proposed trails snaked directly across my land, bisecting my forest, and one particularly offensive scenic overlook was planned for the bluff above my lake, the very spot where my grandfather had taught me to track. The wilderness camping sites were peppered throughout my backcountry. She spoke of shared resources and enhancing community access to nature, her voice dripping with a saccharine benevolence that barely masked the land grab. A few naive neighbors murmured approval, envisioning pleasant Sunday hikes. They didn't see the survey lines on her map cutting through my soul. They didn't understand that their hiking and camping would be an invasion. I said nothing during the presentation, my face a mask of cold-blooded calm, but beneath it, an explosive emotional undercurrent was building. She was trying to legislate away my heritage, to commodify my sanctuary for people who thought roughing it was a broken sprinkler head. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was theft, cloaked in the language of community spirit. After the meeting, Brenda approached me, a smug little smile playing on her lips. "We're really looking forward to making the backcountry accessible to everyone, Mr. Henderson. I trust you'll be cooperative?" The deadpan sarcasm I longed to unleash remained locked behind a wall of tactical restraint. "Brenda," I said, my voice devoid of inflection, "that land you've so generously offered up for hiking and camping, it's all mine. Every tree, every rock, every square inch of that backcountry you're planning to invade." Her smile faltered just for a second. "Well, easements can be discussed. For the good of the community. The good of the community, that old tired refrain of tyrants." That night the decision was made. They had crossed a line etched not just in surveyor's ink, but in generations of my family's sweat and love for that land. My reluctance to engage was gone, replaced by a chillingly precise intent. The reluctant warrior was awake. My first call was to Marcus Thorne, an old friend from a past life where maps and boundaries meant the difference between mission success and international incident. Marcus, now a semi-retired land surveyor with a penchant for conspiracy theories and an almost supernatural ability with GIS software, was my perfect eccentric ally. They want to put hiking trails on your ancestral hunting grounds, across your private fishing lake, and establish camping sites in your personal backcountry, you say. He chuckled, the sound like gravel in a cement mixer. "Sounds like they've mistaken your patience for permission." Within days, Marcus was on site. We walked every inch of the boundary line between my property and the HOA development. He had the original survey maps, deeds stretching back to the original land grant, and a high-precision GPS unit that looked like it belonged in a spy movie. His drone, Icarus, provided thermal camera overlays and high-resolution aerial photography. "They don't just want a trail, John," Marcus said, pointing to a faint indentation in the earth near the edge of my forest. "They've already been scouting. Look here, boot prints, non-native plant disturbance. These HOA cops, as you call them, have been trespassing for a while now, probably feeling out routes for their grand hiking scheme." This was no longer about fines for legitimate hunting or fishing. This was about a calculated incursion onto my land. The supporting evidence Marcus gathered was meticulous. Time-stamped photos, GPS coordinates of every transgression, even satellite imagery showing increased foot traffic originating from the HOA common areas and leading into my backcountry. He even found Brenda Mulroney's distinctive pink hiking boot prints a good quarter-mile inside my property line, near the creek that fed my lake, far beyond any conceivable accidental straying. The dormant authority I possessed wasn't just ownership. It was a deep understanding of land rights, honed by years, dealing with far more complex territorial disputes than a suburban HOA. I knew the letter of the law, and I knew how to wield it with surgical precision. The more data we gathered, the clearer the picture became. Brenda's initiative wasn't just aspirational. It was based on a pattern of existing, albeit minor, trespass, which she now sought to legitimize. The next phase was legal, and for that, I turned to Eleanor Vance. Ellie was a razor-sharp attorney, specializing in property and land use law, with a reputation for dismantling bullies like Brenda for breakfast. She had been a JAG officer, and our paths had crossed when I needed someone who understood both the law and the kind of mindset that disrespects clearly defined borders. I laid out the history, the initial fines for fishing and hunting, the escalating harassment by the HOA cops, the attempted land grab disguised as a community project, and Marcus's comprehensive dossier of trespassing. Ellie listened, her expression unreadable, occasionally making a terse note on a legal pad. When I finished, she leaned back. So, Brenda Mulroney, HOA president, believes her jurisdiction extends over your private backcountry, your lake, your forest, essentially all your land adjacent to the development, simply because she wishes it so. Her tone was dry, with a hint of the legally lethal precision I admired. She wants to allow hiking and camping by HOA members on your private property, and she's using HOA funds and resources to plan this. I nodded. She thinks she can just declare it open season. Ellie smiled, a thin, dangerous curve of her lips. John, she's handed us a tactical advantage on a silver platter. This isn't just overreach. This is tortious interference, trespass, and potentially misuse of HOA funds if she's spent a dime on surveying or planning related to your land without your consent. She outlined the strategy. Step 1. A cease and desist letter so ironclad it would make Brenda's head spin, detailing every infraction, every piece of evidence, and the specific statutes she and the HOA were violating. Step 2. Formal notices of trespass to individual HOA cops caught on camera. Step 3. Secure the perimeter. Not with a moat, John, Ellie said, a rare glimmer of humor in her eyes, but with clearly marked, legally compliant no trespassing signs, citing the relevant state codes, placed at intervals that leave no room for ambiguity, and a very strongly worded letter to the entire HOA, clarifying the absolute prohibition of any hiking, camping, or recreational use of your property by its members or their guests. The monologue was heavy with strategic inner commentary for me, translating into a clear plan of action. The waves of anxiety that had been building within me began to recede, replaced by a cold, focused energy. The execution was a masterpiece of coordinated action, a civilian equivalent of a tactical operation. While Ellie drafted the legal ordinance, Marcus and I, with the help of a bewildered but increasingly supportive handful of neighbors who had also suffered under Brenda's reign, began the physical demarcation. These weren't just any no trespassing signs. These were custom-made, aluminum-backed reflective signs, each bearing the specific legal code for criminal trespass in our state, my name as landowner, and a direct contact for law enforcement. We installed them every 50 feet along the entire boundary bordering the HOA. Each signpost was sunk in concrete. We put up a sturdy but aesthetically congruous split-rail fence along the most vulnerable sections, the kind that says, "This is a boundary," without screaming, "fortress." The fence itself became a visual metaphor for defiance and control. At the main historical access point, from the development into my backcountry, a path worn by deer, not people, until recently, we installed a heavy-duty, locked gate. It wasn't just about preventing hiking and camping. It was about reclaiming sovereignty over my land, my forest, my lake. The day Ellie's letters went out via certified mail was a quiet one. One to Brenda personally, detailing her specific trespasses. One to the HOA board, outlining their collective liability. And a general notice to all homeowners, clarifying in no uncertain terms that the 1,000 acres of backcountry, the lake, the forest, all of it, was private property, and any unauthorized access for hiking, camping, fishing, hunting, or any other purpose would be met with the full force of the law. I even had Marcus's drone capture footage of the letters being delivered, zoom-ins on the return receipts. That evening, I sat on my porch, the porch light a beacon of reclaimed control, and watched the first of the HOA cops discover the new signage. The confusion, then indignation, then impotent fury on his face was a small, grim satisfaction. He made a call, presumably to Brenda. The waves of her impending meltdown were almost palpable even from a distance. The fallout was immediate and incandescent. My phone began ringing, blocked numbers, naturally. I let them go to voicemail. The messages, when I listened later, were a predictable blend of outrage, disbelief, and thinly veiled threats from Brenda and her acolytes. The phrase, "How dare you ban us from hiking and camping in our backcountry," was a common and tellingly delusional refrain. Apparently, the concept of private property was alien to them when it inconvenienced their recreational desires. Brenda, true to form, attempted to rally her troops. An emergency HOA meeting was called, the agenda item simply listed as Urgent community access issue. Ellie and I attended. The air in the community clubhouse was thick with hostility. Brenda, her face a mask of righteous fury, launched into a tirade about my selfish and unneighborly actions, about denying the community vital access to nature. She waved my letter, the one clarifying my property rights, as if it were a declaration of war. He thinks he can just put up fences and keep us out of the forest, off the hiking trails our children deserve, away from the camping spots we've all looked forward to, she thundered. When she finally paused for breath, Ellie rose, calm and collected. Ms. Mulroney. Ellie began, her voice carrying easily through the suddenly silent room. Mr. Henderson doesn't think he can keep you off his land. He knows he can, because it is, in fact, his land. What you refer to as hiking trails our children deserve, and camping spots we've all looked forward to are figments of your imagination, located entirely on private property which you have no right to access, let alone develop. Ellie then proceeded, with dramatic lighting changes on emotional beats, in my mind's eye at least, as she was simply standing under fluorescent lights, to dismantle Brenda's entire premise. She presented enlargements of the survey maps, the deeds, drone surveillance stills of Brenda herself trespassing. She highlighted the legal definitions of trespass, the potential liabilities for the HOA if they encouraged or facilitated it, the documented history of harassment over my legal hunting and fishing. The HOA cops in attendance shifted uncomfortably. The silent majority of neighbors, who had been cowed by Brenda for years, began to murmur, this time with a different inflection. Brenda attempted to bluster. This is an outrage. We will fight this. There are easements, historical rights of way. Ellie, with a predatory calmness, simply replied, produce them. Show us any legally recognized easement or right-of-way that permits general public hiking or camping on Mr. Henderson's Backcountry estate, because my research and the county records show none. What they do show, and here she paused, letting the weight of her words sink in, is a pattern of unauthorized access by certain HOA members, including yourself, Ms. Mulroney, which constitutes criminal trespass. She then presented a bill to the HOA for the cost of the survey, the legal fees incurred to defend against their overreach, and the installation of the new fencing and signage. This, Ellie stated, her voice cold as ice, is the cost of attempting to appropriate land that does not belong to you. The room was stunned. Brenda's face had gone from flushed red to a sickly white. The visual metaphor of the locked gate resonated. She had run full tilt into an immovable object of law and fact. One neighbor, a quiet man I'd only ever exchanged nods with, stood up. So, all those times Brenda told us the community trail initiative was moving forward, that the land was practically ours for hiking, that was all? Ellie nodded. Premised on an incorrect assumption of access, at best. At worst, a deliberate misrepresentation to encourage trespassing on Mr. Henderson's land, his forest, his lake frontage. The dam of silence broke. Other neighbors started speaking, questioning Brenda's use of HOA funds for her trail surveys, her unilateral decisions, her constant stream of violation notices for trivial matters, while she plotted a literal land grab. The public reckoning was swift and brutal. Brenda's authority crumbled before our eyes. The HOA cops looked like deflated balloons. The carefully constructed facade of her power, built on bluff and intimidation, had been shattered by the cold, hard reality of property law and meticulously gathered evidence. They didn't know I was a man who valued precision, who understood strategy, and who would defend his family's legacy with a cold-blooded calm that masked an intensely personal commitment. The aftermath was quiet. Gloriously quiet. The emergency meeting ended with Brenda Mulroney sputtering, her power base decimated. A motion was quickly tabled by a newly emboldened group of homeowners to audit all of Brenda's recent expenditures and to review the HOA's legal counsel. Clearly, their current advice, if any, had been disastrous. Within a month, Brenda resigned as HOA president, citing personal reasons. The HOA cops disbanded, their self-importance punctured. The new HOA board, chastened and far more respectful of boundaries, sent a formal letter of apology to me and my family, along with a check covering the expenses Ellie had billed them. They even asked for guidance on how to respectfully coexist with the vast backcountry that bordered their development. My advice was simple. Stay on your side of the fence. The new "no trespassing" signs remained, gleaming sentinels of our hard-won peace. The gate to the old deer path into my forest stayed locked. My family resumed our lives. My daughter's bird feeders were rehung, attracting a riot of color and song, unmolested by violation notices. My early morning fishing trips on my lake were once again serene, the only sounds the dip of the paddle, the call of a loon, and the gentle lapping of waves against the canoe. The hunting season in the backcountry was pursued with the same respect and care as always, but now without the shadow of Brenda's imagined jurisdiction looming over us. Sometimes, I'd see hikers from the subdivision walking along the edge of my property line, looking wistfully into the deep green of my forest, but they never crossed. They understood now. This was my land. The moral cost of action had been the temporary disruption of our peace, the somber resilience required to see it through. But the protective loyalty I felt for my family and our heritage had fueled the calculated vengeance. There was no climactic confrontation in the traditional sense, just the slow, satisfying dismantling of a petty tyrant's delusions, accomplished with tactical precision and a righteous fury that burned cold and bright. The local corruption, if you could call Brenda's ego-driven machinations, that had been exposed not through dramatic document leaks, but through the simple, irrefutable truth of a surveyor's map and a property deed. The symbolic revenge tied to family legacy was complete. My grandfather, who had first cleared paths through that backcountry, who had taught me to fish in that lake and hunt in that forest, would, I think, have approved of the methodical way his domain was defended. The tactical ops metaphor for legal strategy had played out perfectly. Ellie was the general, Marcus the intel officer, and I, the field commander, executing a plan based on superior information and unshakable resolve. The surprise reversal wasn't that I was planning all along, but that they had so catastrophically underestimated the quiet man who just wanted to be left alone to enjoy his hunting and fishing. They didn't realize that pushing too far would awaken a deeply ingrained instinct to protect what was mine. Now, the porch light is no longer a defiant beacon, but a welcoming glow. The locked gate isn't a symbol of war, but of psychological closure. The waves on my lake still whisper secrets, but now they are secrets of peace, of solitude, of a hard-won tranquility. The blood metaphor, thankfully, remained just that, a metaphor for the moral cost, not a literal one. There's a certain dark situational irony in knowing that the HOA, once so keen to regulate every blade of grass, now gives my property a wide and respectful berth. Their absurdity, juxtaposed against the quiet dignity of the ancient forest and the enduring strength of property rights, had been their undoing. You won't believe what happened next, or perhaps you will. Nothing. And that nothingness, that absence of harassment, that utter lack of HOA cops peering through the trees, is the sweetest victory of all. The only hiking and camping that happens in this backcountry now is by my family and our guests, by invitation only. The forest breathes easier. So do I. The intense personal toll had faded, replaced by a somber resilience and the quiet satisfaction of justice served, not hot, but cold, calculated, and with surgical precision.